Welcome CSE 235 class to part 3, and we're going to call this ex6-tipcalc3. We'll actually save it as a different file just because we are going to alter what we already did, and I don't want you to mess anything up, because then if you mess it up you're going to be like, wow, I had it right the first time. So we are going to save it as a different file, but we'll still call it ex6. It's not what we're going to do isn't worth calling it a whole new exercise, but when you send me files you'll send me two URLs, one to the ex6-tipcalc2 and one to ex6-tipcalc3. So this will be tipcalc3, and this will be just a revised version of the last one that you did in order to make it a little more functional, so that if someone doesn't put a value in here, you'll get a little message saying please enter a meal amount, and then they'll be forced to put in a value, and then it'll run just like the other one, and then it'll display the information. But what we don't want to have happen is right now, if that happens, if you just do ctip, it gets a NaN. So we don't want to have that happen. That just looks bad, and it looks like we're not kind of aware of what people might do, because you always have to kind of test things out and see what people will do. Some people might not click anything or not know what to do. So testing it out is always good. It's always good to have somebody else try it out, and then if they're confused about something, then that's where usability and interface design comes in, because you want to be able to predict or anticipate what your user is going to be doing. So that's part of usability and interface design. So we're going to build that in. It won't take a lot. It's just a little bit of code we're going to add to our file. It's just adding one new function, and actually the function we add is going to include our original function in it. So it's kind of just putting a little checkpoint in there. So I'm going to go back to my file, and like I mentioned, I'm going to call it tipcalc3, and then I'll save as new JS so that it's a completely new file, and I still have my other tipcalc2. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a new function, and I'll just go right after. I'll do it in between. I'll do it before my function ctip, and I'll call it function check meal. I'll call it check meal so that it checks that somebody put something in there. Or you could call it anything you want, but I'll call it function check meal, and I'll make sure to put my two curly braces in there. And what's going to happen in here is we're going to do a if-else statement. We call them if-else statements. It's a conditional statement that basically looks at a scenario. If a condition is met, it'll run a particular statement, and if a condition is not met, it'll run a particular statement. Now the two statements we're going to run is actually, the second one is basically just going to run this function. That's what's going to happen. As long as they put a number in there, they'll run the function. But if they don't run the function, we're just going to do a window alert. And we could do this different ways. You could put a message on the page that shows up in red or something. You know, that's another thing you could do. You could always put a little, an extra paragraph that doesn't have anything in, that just says please enter a meal amount, that shows up like right below here or something. So that's something you could do. We'll try the alert window since we've already used that in the past. And what we're going to do now, keep in mind that if else has two statements inside of curly brackets. So that means everything will go inside this. So what I recommend, so you don't get messed up, is spread this out a little, because you're still going to, everything is going to go inside these. So you're going to have 6 curly brackets. You're going to have 2 for the if and 2 for the else. So I'll get started here, and the way a conditional statement works, you basically start it off by just saying if, and then whatever the condition is goes in parentheses. So I can't even close the parentheses, but the condition is going to be if, well, what is the condition? If this thing is empty. So it's basically going to be kind of like this. So I could kind of grab this and copy it. So it's basically going to be if this meal thing is empty. So I'll copy that, and I'll put it in here. If document.getElementById meal.value is if the value is empty, and then what's going to happen? Now we have to run a statement, so we have to put another set of curly brackets here, and I'll leave them indented, and I'll kind of move down and I'll indent again, so that this one is on the outside. This one matches up with function. This one matches up with the if. So what's going to happen if they don't do that? Well, we're going to do a window.alert, and then within the parentheses, we're just going to put a string like please enter a meal amount. And I'll close off that parentheses, and I'll put a semicolon, and that's the if. So you could even check how that works so far, although we don't have this function running. How is this function going to run? We really want it to run if they click ctip. So actually this will no longer be ctip, this will be check meal. So the first thing that'll happen when they click this see tip button is they'll check the meal, because you don't want to have two buttons, one to check. You basically, if they click it and nothing happens, then you want to give them a message to say, hey, put in a meal amount. Now the second part of this, and this is the way it's usually written, it's the else, and it also has two brackets, but it usually looks like this when it's formatted, so I'll try to keep it formatted like this. They usually put the else. Now there's no condition for else. Else is just else. It means if this condition is not met, then do this. So if the condition is not met, then do the else. And if it's not met, that means they put in a number and everything's okay. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to run our function, because we have ctip down here, and to run our function, we can just run it by just going ctip. It's actually pretty easy. We're just going to put ctip. So it's just going to run the function as long as they put in a number. So this is the bad thing. If they don't put in a number, they'll get a little scolding. They'll get a window alert message. But otherwise, they'll just run the function as it is down here. So I might as well clean this up and get things closer together. So it's just, this is the function. This is the new function that's going to run when we click the button. So it'll basically check, and if things aren't there, it's going to run a window alert, and then it's going to just follow through and continue and run this function. And that function should be fine the way it is. So we'll see if this works. I'll save my update and I'll run my code to kind of reset it, and to try it out, I'll just hit ctip. And it's not working right now because I'm not sure why. Document. So we're going to have to find out why that's not working, because we left that empty. I did save update, and I did run code. So everything looks okay so far. The function check meal, we have all our brackets, 2 brackets for if, 2 brackets for else. We're running our ctip, that's what we called it. We have a semicolon in here, and up here let's check how check meal is running button on click with the ctip. So everything looks okay so far. Okay, I just cheated and looked at the version I did last time, and I see what it is. If you look in here, there's something in here that looks a little different, and we haven't talked about it, but it's very important with JavaScript, and it's very important with if-else statements. And if anybody worked with ActionScript, it should look familiar if you remember those double equals. And I forgot to do that when I did that in here, because I just copied that. But remember, the equal sign is basically an assignment operator. It basically just says make that be nothing. It doesn't test equality between the others. When you want to test if something is equal to something else, this doesn't mean equal to. This basically means assign it to nothing. So if this is assigned to nothing, window alert, it doesn't really know if you're judging that, if that's not really a condition. This isn't a condition operator. I guess that's the way to point that out. This isn't a condition operator. So in order to test equality, we actually have to use 2 equal signs. So just one little equal sign in there, and this thing didn't work. So let me save update and run code and see if that was the problem. So I'll ctip, and now we have please enter a meal amount, and you can hit OK, and then you put in a meal amount. I just spent $200, and I'm going to give a 25. I'll put a tip 42. Maybe I'll try to make it go to 50. That person was really a great waitress. They're 25. They're 50. And then they get a $50 tip from our bill. And our thing works. Our little application here works, and it was just missing that little equal sign. So just remember, when you copy that, this is assignment. That's an assignment operator, and this is an equality operator. There's even 3 equal signs you'll see sometimes, and I'll point that out where to look at in W3 Schools for JavaScript, so that you're aware of that in the future. But you will use these whenever you use if-else statements or conditional statements. You'll need some kind of conditional operator in there. So everything is working out okay. You could send me one URL after the other. You could just put them both in an email and send them to me, and then you'll be done with ex6-tipcalc, both 2 and 3 in one shot.